Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a challenge that, well, it haunts pretty much every successful methodology out there. How do you maintain a really precise, detailed, rigorous standard when you jump from that one-on-one expert instruction to a large group setting? You've got to scale, but without sacrificing the integrity, right?
That's absolutely the core conflict we're digging into today. We're looking specifically at the Stott Pilates method, which is globally recognized. It's built on these incredibly precise, often individualized adjustments. And we're exploring how its 6 core biomechanical principles get adapted for, say, a packed studio, maybe 15, 20 people.
Yeah, it sounds like the ultimate pedagogical tightrope walk. And, you, the listener, might already be familiar with these fundamentals. But just to ground us for a second, these 6 principles, they're the absolute foundation for a secure, effective practice. We're talking respiration, pelvic placement, rib cage placement, scapular stabilization and mobilization, head and cervical alignment, and finally, lower extremity alignment.
Exactly. And when you get certified in this method, you learn these principles in, well, excruciating detail. Often needs hands-on correction. But the source material we looked at asks that central, really practical question. When you're facing 20 people, can you truly teach by the book? Can you correct every single posture, every little micro movement?
And the answer, it seems, according to the instructor's own methodology, is that the principles themselves, they're non-negotiable. Fidelity is key. But the application, that requires a massive shift. It's what the sources call fine adaptation and collective pedagogy.
Yeah.
Kind of stop being a mechanic, making individual tweaks, and start being more like a conductor, orchestrating a whole group movement.
It's fascinating, actually, how the role of the very first principle, respiration, changes almost entirely in this group setting. See, in one-on-one teaching, lateral thoracic breathing, breathing into the sides and back of the ribs, it's explained pretty strictly as a biomechanical tool. Helps engage core stabilizers without letting the belly bulge out.
Right, purely functional, but in a big group. Suddenly it takes on this whole new, almost psychological function, becomes the great unifier.
Precisely. The source material notes that by guiding, say, a long, controlled exhale, paying attention to the rhythm, the instructor actually installs a shared pulse in the room. It creates this energy that moves, as they put it, like a wave. This shared guided breath, it supports group attention, gets everyone centered almost instantly. It moves the collective from, chaotic individuals into a focused unit.
So the adaptation here isn't about achieving perfect biomechanics on the breath for 20 different bodies all at once. That sounds impossible. Instead, they're using the breath to create collective focus, which means, I guess, ditching complex terminology, relying on regularly repeated, really simple cues like inhale through the nose, exhale long and slow, feel the ribs open sideways, things like that.
Exactly that. The instructor has to prioritize the, let's say, general impact over chasing individual perfection on the breath. And that leads us quite smoothly into the third principle, placement of the rib cage. This is so critical for stabilizing the center, making sure those deep core muscles are engaged.
Okay, this is a tricky one, though, because in a large group, you're going to see people letting their ribs flare open or their spine arching way too much. That classic hyperextension that puts strain on the lower back.
Yeah.
If you can't physically go and press their ribs down, what's the immediate collective cue you give?
Right. Since you can't use that tactile feedback, you have to pivot. You move to the visual and the metaphorical. You need these highly accessible images combined with that ongoing collective breathing rhythm we just talked about. You might use metaphors like, imagine your ribs sliding down towards your pelvis.
Sliding toward the pelvis. Okay, that's brilliant because it's an immediate intuitive command. It cues the core engagement you need to stabilize the upper trunk. And it's way faster than saying, engage your transversus abdominis and draw your lower ribs down toward your superior iliac spine, or whatever the technical term is.
Exactly. Or another common cue might be, feel your breastbone floating gently without rising too high. The goal here is progressive awareness. You're not demanding immediate technical perfection from all 20 people. You're mainly trying to prevent major compensatory movements, the kind that could cause injury. By giving these intuitive instructions, the whole room can apply pretty much simultaneously.
Got it. Okay, let's move to the second principle then, pelvic placement. Finding that really delicate balance between a neutral spine and an imprinted or slightly tilted position. This is often, I find, the hardest thing to explain verbally, even one-on-one. So if the instructor can't manually check everyone's pelvic tilt, how do you communicate that necessary nuance collectively?
This is really where metaphor becomes the core technology for ensuring safety. Since manual correction is just impossible in a large room, they simplify the body anchor. Instead of launching into a complicated anatomical lecture, the instructor chooses a single, powerful image.
Okay, give me the definitive image. What's the go-to metaphor they use from the source material for the pelvis?
Well, the classic one you'll hear is, imagine your pelvis resting like a stable bowl of water. The idea is if the water spills out the front, you're arching your back too much. If it spills out the back, you're tucking under too hard. You're aiming for that stable, balanced bowl.
That is effective, yeah. But let me challenge this just slightly. Doesn't simplifying the alignment down to just a stable bowl of water, doesn't that risk compromising the technical precision needed for more advanced students? Those who really need to maintain a perfect neutral curve.
That's a fair point, and it highlights the necessary trade-off in collective teaching. The goal shifts slightly. It moves from absolute technical perfection for everyone towards functional safety for everyone. In a large class, the top priority has to be ensuring everyone avoids potentially dangerous positions like severe hyperextension or heavy compression in the lower spine. The stable bowl gives the vast majority of students, especially beginners or intermediates, a really good approximation of the correct position. And honestly, that's often the best and safest outcome you can hope for when you simply can't provide individual tactile feedback.
Right, function over absolute form for the stick of the collective. Okay, I get it. Now let's talk shoulders principle 4. Stabilization and mobilization of the scapulae, the shoulder blades. Students often really struggle to feel these movements, don't they? They're internal, they can be complex to move independently. How do we make that internal action visible and simple for everyone at once?
Yeah, this definitely requires powerful, almost visceral imagery, something that links that internal feeling to an external, relatable action. You want the students to kind of stop thinking about specific muscles and start thinking about movement patterns.
So what's the go-to instruction? What kind of imagery works?
The source material really focuses on depression and stabilization first. So one key metaphor is, imagine your shoulder blades sliding down into your back pockets. That instantly cues that necessary downward movement, pulling them away from the ears.
Sliding into the back pockets. I like that. That's fantastic for preventing that common issue of shoulders bunching up around the neck, creating tension.
Exactly. Or for exercises involving mobilization, they might cue, allow your shoulder blades to spread wide like wings. See, this imagery simplifies what could be a complex sequence of muscle engagement into a singular, intuitive visual command. And this is actually one area where collective verbal correction is super effective. Just a swift reminder to the entire group like release the tension in your shoulders or lengthen through your neck can prevent a lot of that common cervical tension people get when they over-engage their upper traps.
Speaking of neck tension, that brings us neatly to the last couple of principles. Let's tackle number 5, placement of the head and alignment of the cervical vertebrae. This feels like a high-risk area, especially during abdominal flexion work, right? The instructor just cannot physically support every single head in a large class.
Absolutely. You have to install this sense of collective vigilance, really, to protect the spine. And the protective metaphor used here is famous for a reason. It's instantly precise. Imagine an apple stuck just under your chin. You don't want to crush the apple, but you don't want to lose it either.
The famous apple cue. Yes. It works because it maintains that natural alignment, that small curve of the neck without letting the head drop too far back or jut too far forward. It's like the perfect example of achieving precision through an accessible analogy.
Totally. And they also really insist on emphasizing lengthening cues. Things like lengthen the back of your neck or reminding students to look toward your knees, not up at the ceiling during curl-ups. These simple, repeatable instructions address and prevent the majority of common cervical errors, ensuring safety even when you can't do manual spot checking.
Okay, brilliant. So finally, we arrive at the 6th principle, alignment of the lower extremity, making sure the feet, knees, and hips are all working together coherently. This is crucial during exercises like bridging or leg circles or even just standing work. But again, in a large class, you just can't afford the time for micro adjustments to everyone's foot angles or knee tracking. What's the adaptation here?
Yeah, you essentially have to skip the detailed individual correction and rely instead on fast, easily visualizable cues that encourage self-correction. The instruction needs to be instantly actionable and laser-focused on stability.
Okay, like what kind of physical checkpoints do they get people to focus on?
We're talking rapid-fire cues, things like ensure your knees are tracking directly over your ankles. Quick checks they can do themselves. They might also reference the foot's contact points on the mat. Feel the 3 points of support under each foot: the heel, the base of the big toe, and the base of the little toe. Ground yourself through those points.
That's a great example of empowering the student, isn't it? By giving them those specific physical checkpoints, the instructor has essentially deputized every individual in the room. They become their own alignment specialist, in a way. Ensures safety for the whole class.
Exactly. The students aren't just passive recipients of instruction anymore. They become active participants in finding their own alignment relative to the guiding principle.
And this shift from being the individual adjuster to being the empowered guide, that really brings us to the biggest takeaway from the source material, I think. This whole idea of the art of collective pedagogy. Beyond just adapting the 6 principles, what does this new role, the group conductor, actually look like in action? How does it feel different?
Well, the instructor has to become much more of a facilitator.
Yeah.
Balancing that technical rigor we talked about with extraordinary pedagogical flexibility. It means constantly prioritizing the overall needs and safety of the group while still holding the line on those core safety principles, the dynamic balance.
So let's explore those collective teaching adaptations a bit more, moving beyond just the 6 principles themselves. When the group is moving, flowing through exercises, what are the key strategies this conductor employs?
Okay, first and foremost, it's visual communication. If you can't touch everyone, you absolutely must show them clearly. That means really clear visual demonstrations, using ample gestures, maybe slowing down certain phases of a movement, and modeling exemplary postures that are easy for people to see and replicate.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, in that environment, a picture truly is worth 1,000 words, or maybe 1,000 tactile cues you can't give.
Definitely. Second is the heavy reliance on collective corrections. Instead of maybe subtly correcting one individual, the instructor targets the 2 or 3 most common errors they're seeing across the room and corrects them for the entire group simultaneously. For example, they might pause the flow briefly to say, "Okay, everyone, I see many of us letting our necks tense up here. Remember that apple under the chin? Check yourself right now."
Oh, I love that. And also the idea of building in autocorrection and checkpoints, inviting students to regularly self-assess their own form. You sort of hand the responsibility back to the learner, which must foster independence over time.
Critically important, yes. And the sources also discuss something they call segmentation without fragmentation. This is really key to managing a mixed level group, which is common. It basically means offering multiple options or modifications within the same exercise. So you give beginners simpler modifications while maybe offering advanced students a greater challenge, all without disrupting the overall flow or making anyone feel singled out or excluded.
Right. That requires really expert verbal control, though. You might say something like, okay, if you need a modification here, keep your feet on the floor. If you're ready for the challenge, lift your feet, maintain that stable bowl pelvis. The language has to be immediate, clear, and totally respect the group's rhythm.
Precisely. And finally, maybe underpinning all of this, the instructor absolutely must manage the motivation and rhythm of the class. Keeping the class dynamic by varying sequences, avoiding monotony, maybe introducing playful challenges here and there. It helps value progress over demanding instant perfection. The teaching itself becomes almost like a living performance.
That dynamic understanding, that feels like the central takeaway here for any learner, really, regardless of their field. The fidelity to the method isn't about just mechanically applying the rules from the manual. It's about, as the sources say, a living and intelligent adaptation to the reality of the room, the reality of the audience. The principles get translated, they're rendered accessible, they're made collective primarily through smart metaphor and crystal clear visual guidance.
That's a perfect distillation, I think. Adaptation doesn't mean abandoning rigor. It absolutely doesn't. It means finding clever, collective, often visual solutions that secure the core foundation of the practice for the greatest number of people safely.
And the success of this collective class, the sources really insist it's measured not just by, perfect technical execution by every single person, but by the quality of the shared experience. Students feeling stable, feeling aligned, feeling conscious in their movement, and leaving with that sensation of having genuinely progressed within this structured, rigorous methodology.
Yeah, it shifts the whole metric of success. It moves from did every single person do it perfectly to something more like did the group leave feeling stable, safe, connected, and aware.
So thinking about this, what does this all mean for you, the listener, maybe in your own field? Think about a system or a discipline you deal with. Something that's currently maybe locked up in dense technical manuals or complex protocols. Perhaps it's intricate project management guidelines or complex software deployment procedures, or even advanced leadership frameworks you're trying to teach.
Ask yourself, what is your equivalent of the stable bowl of water? What core principle in your world could benefit from being translated? Translated through simple collective metaphors or maybe powerful visual cues instead of just relying on overwhelming technical instructions. How could that help achieve that essential unity, that shared understanding, and ultimately that immediate widespread progress across your team or your organization?
It's really the art of simplifying complexity, isn't it? Simplifying it for collective, rapid success. And that is always something worth diving deeper into.